Started. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to RBCM at Home Kids, a play date across Victoria, Greater Victoria, Vancouver Island, and British Columbia. My name is Chris O'Connor. I'm a learning program developer here at the Royal BC Museum. My home and the museum is on the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. And I'm grateful to live, learn, and raise a family on this land. So if you, over the past 2 years, and now it's almost exactly 2 years, because it's since the pandemic started. In March of 2020, things changed in many, many ways for many, many people around the world, but here in Victoria as well, and here at the Royal BC Museum. And one of the things that we did was to change doing on-site programs to doing more virtual programs. And one of the programs that came out of that was RBCM at Home Kids, which we did every week for a good long while, probably a year and a half. And then we stopped doing it as regularly, but we still do it every once in a while. So we'll do it every month or every couple months. So it's every time we're able to come back and do a RBCM at Home Kids, it's such a pleasure. So thank you so much for joining in. And the very first RBCM at Home Kids was around paleontology, because when people think about museums, especially natural history museums, the first thing that you think about is dinosaurs. The first thing you think about is fossils. At least that's what I think about. So it's been a pleasure to touch back in on paleontology over the time of the RBCM at Home Kids program. And today we do it again. And so we have a very special guest today who's a student at UVic doing studying earth sciences at UVic, and now is doing some help and support within the collections of the Paleontology Collection. So Andrea Valcourt is our special guest today. And so welcome, Andrea.
Hi.
We're so glad that you're here. And the Paleontology Collection is huge, vast collection within the museum. The museum has it's often said, but it's debatable, but 7 million items, specimens, belongings, objects, documents, images, and about 100,000 fossil specimens. And that's a whole range of different specimens and different kinds of fossils. But today, Andrea, what are we going to focus on today? What is the special kind of fossil that we're going to focus in on today?
So today we're going to focus in on fish fossils. I'm doing research here in the Maccabee collection, which was a lake during the Eocene. This collection has lots of fossils, including fish and plants, some insects as well, which is really rare. I'm focusing on the fish. I get to identify them, and I use not only the fish fossil, but also the rock that it's in to try and figure out what kind of environment the lake was, and cool things like that.
So in that Maccabee collection, that collection of many different kinds of fossils, how many were, or what percentage were fish? Were there a lot of fish fossils, or what were the other things that were found within that collection? Because sometimes people may think of fossils and they only think of dinosaurs. So what's the range of the kind of material within that collection?
I'll show you some of the cabinets. There's a few cabinets designated just for plants. There's one for insects, but there's quite a few of the cabinets, around 3, that has all these drawers of fish fossils and fish bits.
So sometimes it's just a portion of what was the fish, and sometimes it's the whole. Like there, it looks like it's just a portion of it. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, some of them are full fish, like this one's pretty close, it's just missing the head. Some of them will like only have the head. Some of them will be random bones scattered around. Keeps things interesting.
So if I'm out on the, if you're out in the field, or if I'm out on the field in the field and I'm walking past, would I see something like that just out in the open, or is that something where you have to break open rock in order to reveal a fish fossil like that? Or is it, how does that work in terms of finding fossils, or what's the process of getting those kind of fossils from the field into the museum like this?
Certain rocks will already like have layers, so they'll break apart easily, and you might be able to find a section like this that has the fossil exposed. But a lot of time they use this special hammer, like pickaxe, almost like in Minecraft, where they'll
Mm.
like break it apart. And as you can see, there's like lines in the side.
Oh
So
yeah.
it'll like break along the plane, and then you'll have nice fossils inside.
Oh, okay. Great. And it looks like there's a wide variety of fish as well. Are these, can you tell us a little bit about the fish? Are they fish that would be recognizable to us today, or are they fish that are extinct that would look very different in today's environment?
The fish that we have are close relatives to fish we would know. There's three main fish. One of them is called Iosalmo. It's like this with a nice long thin body.
Mm.
Um, it's closely related to, I believe, moon eyes, which are like these little silver fish that
Mm.
are in lakes. We also have, um, this isn't a great example, like these two. These would be Amazon. They're related to suckerfish. Um, yeah, they're a lot thicker. They have different counts, like different amount of vertebrae. They have different amount of fin rays, and the body proportions are different.
Mm.
And then the third fish, which is a lot rarer but very cool, is this giant fish over here called Iosalmo, and it's related to modern day salmon.
Oh wow.
So it would be more of a predator in this environment.
And I'm noticing all the cracks and the broken, like there are different fragments that are, so in the field, would you find different fragments maybe like that and then piece it together? It's almost like it seems like a puzzle in a way.
Yeah, so this fish would at least be like found together, but when trying to break it out of the rock, it's probably gonna fall apart like this because it's so big.
Mm.
Um, but it shouldn't be, the skull would be a bit harder to put together, but because of the spine, that makes it a bit easier because it's this nice line that you
Oh yeah,
follow along, and the
right.
fin placements go in a specific spot.
And there might be some people out there, especially some younger kids, that are interested in science and interested in doing science in the museum. So when you said you're researching or you're doing research work, what does that mean when you're doing work in a collection like that in a museum?
I look at a lot of papers for lakes that are similar. Um, I also use old books like this that talk about fish that lives in other lakes, and I try
Mhm.
and compare it to what we're seeing here. So if we're seeing similar fish and similar, a good example. So one paper was saying how if the bones are a certain way, then that means that scavengers can get to the fish, so the lake levels must be dropping. So in this example, you can see the nice patch of scales here, and these bones are all from the skull, so something must have been eating the head, which would
Mm.
show that this lake also has a similar level change.
Mm. Wow. So really interesting detective work from all the different
Mhm.
clues within a specimen like that.
Yeah.
And I noticed there's a number there as well. It looks like 004.
Yes. So this particular fossil has 4 different areas of interest, I guess. This one is labeled as number 1, our Eohyodon, which is a nice complete fossil. Then number 2 is this, the part broken off, but the likely a meson. And then number 3 is another like part of scattered little bones. And number 4 is this area of larger bones.
So it seems like that's helpful to like bring your attention to all the small, subtle detail within a specimen like that.
Yeah.
So then I noticed you have a sketch there as well of a fish.
Yeah, so this is the like basic structure of the fish bones that you often see in the fossils. This is kind of like what we're going to be putting on our dough for today. It's got all the different parts like the skull, the jaw, where the eye would be, all the different fins, the 2 types of vertebrae we'll be using. Yeah.
Great. Is there anything else you wanted to say about the work that you're doing there before we get to work in making our own fish fossil?
I believe that was everything I was going to say, so
Okay,
we
great.
can get started on our fossils.
Great. So just as a reminder to those watching, you don't need to have these things. And if you don't, that's okay. You can come back and do it later. This video will be on Facebook, on our Facebook page, and also on YouTube in a couple days as well on our YouTube page. So you could always come back when you have the materials, but if you do have Play-Doh or clay, and something like a pencil or something that you could carve into the Play-Doh. All right.
So to start off, we should do a bit of practice just to get used to what it's like drawing in our Play-Doh. So we're going to take a small bit. You could also use a larger bit and reuse it later. And we're just going to roll that up and flatten it. If you have a rolling pin, that's probably going to make this a lot easier. So to practice, let's practice making a nice circle. And we can also practice a square. Might be easier to hold down the ends. And it would also be helpful to practice a curved line.
Looks like a smiley face.
Yeah.
It's interesting as you're doing that, Andrea. I'm just thinking about how, like, as you're looking at the really subtle lines sometimes within rocks of fossils, that understanding the shapes that you're looking at is probably incredibly important as a scientist doing research on fossil specimens. Like what kind of shapes and lines to be looking for. So.
Yeah, definitely helps with figuring out which bones are which.
Mm-hmm.
All right, once you're done practicing, you can take your larger blob of clay or Play-Doh, and we're also going to take this and flatten it. Rolling pins are probably easier, but this works just as well. It doesn't need to be perfectly flat because in rocks they usually aren't.
Mm.
And we want to make sure that its thickness is between a finger width or half a finger width, just so we don't accidentally go all the way through. Nice rock slab. To start with our fossil, if we look here, we're going to start with the head. So we're going to make this nice, almost round triangle for the head, and we'll want to make sure that it's off to the side so we have room for the rest of the fish. And we can use a little circle for his eye. Once we've done that, we can move on to the jaw of the fish. This part's particularly interesting because if you look at some of our specimens, a lot of them have an open jaw. And so you can have your jaw open or closed. In our fossils, if the jaws are open, that tells us that the lake doesn't have very much oxygen at the bottom, which also gives clues that the lake doesn't have too much circulation between the water on top and the water at the bottom. All right. Once that part's done, we're going to start with the nice vertebrae. We'll start with just a simple shape. Don't worry about how many you're making because that is one way to identify the fish by the amount that's there. So we can either make the little squares we practiced. You could also use the back of your tool to just punch little holes. So we'll make a few of those. And we'll want to leave a little bit of space at the end for our tail fin. All right. And then the next part of our vertebrae is the little spines that come out the side. So we're going to use our curved lines on each vertebrae. Don't worry if it gets a little messy. A lot of the actual fossils are a bit hard to see in some spots.
Yeah.
All right. And as I mentioned earlier, and as you can see here, there's two different types of vertebrae. So this section is called the precaudal, and this is the caudal. And the difference between them is there's a nice rib, just like what we as humans have that come out. So again, don't worry about how many, usually about half. You just make our nice.
Like our ribs that protect important organs within our bodies at the sort of top part of our body. Is it similar with a fish? That those ribs are protecting important parts of the fish?
Yeah, a lot of the organs are in this section and back here. We don't really see those in the fossils though.
Right. You just have to assume that they were there.
Yeah. Sometimes if the fish got like stepped on or something, there'll be like mysterious dark patches, which are probably from the organs.
Ah.
Yeah. So once we have our rib, this is like the base of the fish. The only parts left we have are the fins. Fins are pretty neat because they are different shapes. That's another way to identify the species. So for like the dorsal fin, could look like this, where it's super long, could be super small, could also have a weird bump. Could even, there's a few fish that have like almost spiky things and then like a second dorsal fin. So it's up to you whichever one you want to do. It helps to practice, or it helps if you lightly draw out the shape you want of your fin before drawing out the actual fin rays. And the fin rays, they start pretty close together at the bottom and they spread out a bit more. So that's our dorsal fin. We also have the pectoral fin at the front. This one helps the fish steer, but it's pretty small. A few little lines near the head. We also have these two fins at the bottom of the fish. This one, they can also be different shapes, but they mostly have the same function. We can start this one here near the front. Just a few lines. And then the one here near the back. And then finally, we have this tail fin, which is technically called the caudal fin. They're pretty neat because they can tell us a lot about the environment that the fish is in. So there's different shapes like this, where the top one is larger. That kind of fish would live near the bottom of the environment. We also have this shape, which is just round. this fish would be a very strong swimmer, but not very fast. And then the fish that we have in our collection have a tail shape like this. This shape means that they're very fast. And if they're fast, then it must be a big open environment because they have to rely on speed to either get away from prey or to catch prey. So if you want to make it easier, we could make our tail fin have just, this isn't a working pencil, just have very simple lines. But if you want more of a challenge, the rays that we have here, they'll like branch apart and they'll get a bit complicated near the ends of the tail. So if we want to draw our fish, it might be helpful to use a nice little shape, and then it makes it easier to draw the rays.
So that's really interesting that if they see a lot of fish with a similar kind of tail, then that speaks to what kind of body of water it was that they were in. There's so many layers of uncover, and so many like layers of awareness of what's the individual fish was like, but then the environment too.
Yeah, it's like a giant puzzle, and it's
Yeah,
very
giant
fun.
puzzle.
So once you have your fish all together, this would be like what happens when the fish is put directly in the rock. But once we here at the museum find it and it's solid, we take it to get prepped. And to make it easier to store, we'll often just cut away any excess edges like this. So this is a lot easier because it's not hardened rock.
If only it was that soft.
Yeah.
So some of that prep work happens at the museum and some of that prep work is sent away to do?
Yeah, also a few of these, because they were donated by people who, I guess, do this more as a hobby. They prepped a few of the fish and you can see some of the tool marks. But if that's not usually the case, and museums will either hire someone to do it or send it somewhere else. All right, and then
and actually the museum is hiring a preparator, paleo preparator right now. So if you're out there and you're that's something that you do and that you're interested, and you could look on our website and look for that job posting.
All right, and then if you want to keep this as part of your own fossil collection, you can either let it harden by air drying it or put it in the oven, and you can also label it. So if you want to let it harden and then label it like how our specimens have these little stickers, you can do it that way, or you can also carve it right into your Play-Doh. So I'm gonna put 0.001, just like our specimens.
And if you're really ambitious, and then you have as many as we have in our collection, then that will be the first of 100,000 that you make, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there, you have your own fish specimen. You could also even name it. Use your name and add a fancy ending to it. I might name this guy Andrea Hyadon.
Yeah, so that's another thing, is that like sometimes I imagine when you're out in the field that you're finding something that that no one else has ever found before. So it could be discovering a new species, or it could be something that people are aware of, and you know, like you were referring to that book. I imagine that that's part of that, is just like, is this something that's known or is this something that's not known? And if it's not known, then you would you would get to name it. But
Mm.
apparently you can't name it after yourself, right? Is that that's the rule?
You have to follow the naming rules, which is, I believe, in Latin. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
in Latin. That's why Iosalmo sounds a lot like spaces
Oh, yeah,
salmo
the
and
summit, right?
salmon.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. That's it was so fun, and it really. I was wondering if from doing this work and looking so closely at these fish fossils, does it make you look at fish out like today's fish differently, or does it make you think about the different kinds of fins and tails and bone structure of fish that you see nowadays?
Yeah, it definitely does. I almost want to go into the pet store and look at all their fish and see if I can tell what kind of environment they've evolved to
Yeah, right,
be
right.
in. Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for doing this today and for doing research within the paleontology department here at the Royal BC Museum. I really wish you uh, good work for the rest of your time here. I did want to let everyone know that this whole week we've been doing programs mostly in the galleries and in the noon hour. So tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from noon to 1 p.m. come to the Natural History Gallery. And we're doing some activities and have specimens out as well. So if you are in the Victoria area or you're visiting Victoria, come visit us this weekend for some spring break, March break activities. So I guess that's all. So thank you so much, Andrea. Thanks everyone for joining in. And until next time, happy, it's not, so Fossil Friday is a thing. So we should have done this tomorrow to line up with, but maybe by the time your clay is hardened out, it will be Friday. And so be a happy Fossil Friday. So, all right,
Yeah.
everyone, take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.